Hi everyone, this is James from TDB bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today I am trying out a new format. This is one I probably won't do very often, but if people like it, I might try to do it back for our other teas when I'm tasting through. So what is this? I'm basically going to not be drinking any of these teas, but I'm going to be giving just kind of my quick thoughts on them. So they're teas that I've had samples of. I haven't gone through a cake or anything like that of any of these teas. And those are some of the mid-in white tea offerings. So why this? Well, this kind of came to fruition when I was talking with one of my tea friends, Ageless, about just kind of different white teas. And so we kind of decided that we would both order the same samples and compare notes. And this doesn't necessarily neatly fall into kind of a TDB format. So for instance, one format we do have is the videos, of course. And so if there is something that really stands out, that tea would be set aside and I would bring it on for an episode with Denny or perhaps with an in-between-sode for myself. So that's one way it would happen. But what happens for the teas that, don't quite make it to the in-between-sodes or just don't quite fit into a format of like the website where I'm like doing a tea, kind of a themed tea thing. So that's kind of what I'm trying to fulfill here. So I'm going to be running through, I think, 6 different white tea mid-end teas that I did sample. So yeah, mid-end. Why mid-end? Well, I think in the sort of lower end for white tea, and by lower end, I don't mean bad, I just mean like the more inexpensive teas. I think they do have teas that are pretty satisfying there. I think the Lumber S and the Camphire Knot are both quite good and both around kind of that 10 cent per gram range. I spent, I think, 7 cents a gram on the tong of Lumber S I got, and I do thoroughly recommend that for people that like that profile. And I think if you are very, very value oriented and want to get the most for your money, I think that is probably where I would look. So definitely kind of the teas that we're going to be talking about today are interesting for other reasons, and they're not necessarily meant to be the most value focused teas. I think another area that white tea excels that we're not going to talk about so much here is kind of the higher end ripe teas. So things like the Nameless one and Lich Tears, two higher end ripes that I really do enjoy quite a bit. But those are a fair bit more expensive than just about everything that I'm going to be talking about on this episode. So this is really for those teas that are in between. So some of them are, 20 cents a gram, 25 cents a gram. Others are closer to 45, 50 cents a gram. So there is quite a range even within the teas that we will be talking about today. Okay, so let's get into the different ones. Real quickly, I have had all of these teas at least once, kind of like more of the Gonku style, like 5 grams, 75 milliliter Gaiwan, that sort of thing, and also once in kind of like my more blue pot morning routine, so the bigger blue pot. So I've kind of got a feel for them in a couple different contexts, but they're not teas that I know super well, haven't worked through a cake or anything like that with them. Okay, so first up I have Predawn Dark, and so this one is interesting because it's roasted like a yancha. For me at least, this tea didn't come across too much like a wooey or yancha-like at all. In fact, the aroma of it really, really reminded me of just kind of like steamer baskets of dim sum. And so I had that, and like I told Atlas about that, and he couldn't quite relate to that. And then I had it again, and I had the exact same reaction to the tea. So very, very interesting. For me at least, this comes across as fairly ordinary ripe. I could definitely drink this regularly as kind of like a replacement level ripe, but it didn't really stand out to me beyond kind of that really, really unique aroma coming out. Next up, I have Camphire. So this one is pretty interesting. This is a white tea ripe from, I think, a year ago or 2024, something like that. And it's one that they sent to a lapsang master who basically smoked the tea. In talking a little bit with Atlas, who emailed with white tea a bit, he says that these teas should ideally be aged 5 to 10 years. And this is one I definitely don't need to brew again because it does come across very unique. And I do like it. I think this one is a very interesting sort of novelty tea. And so my method of kind of selecting teas to be brought onto other episodes is if they're interesting. So I did immediately set this one aside so as something that would share for Denny. But due to the next tea that I'm about to talk about, it got immediately bumped. And so the tea I'm talking about now is Smokeshou. This is basically kind of the same story as Camphire. I suspect it has better material because it's about twice as expensive as that tea. And this is very pleasing. I feel like this is one where kind of what he was aiming for really hits. Maybe part of it is just simply because the material has been aged a little bit longer. Maybe another part of it is maybe it's better material. But I do recommend people sample this. I don't think this is something I would necessarily want a cake of because I just don't know exactly how it would fit in. But I do find that that smoky sweetness, that profile that it has, is very, very pleasant and very, very interesting. So this is definitely going to be a future one for an episode. We don't release episodes chronologically with how we film, so perhaps it already has been, but it is one that I definitely recommend people check out and sample. Next up, I have one that definitely stood out just because I thought it was really solid and I like the balance and I like the richness of that. This is Ageless Phase. This one is about 25 cents a gram. This is a relatively standard ripe, but I think it's just a very good quality ripe. The texture is very nice. It's not as silky, but it is very rich. It's got creamy. It's got a good body. And for me, at least, it's just qualified as a good tea. And it stood out both in kind of my normal session with it, kind of Gung Fu style, as well as my Big Blue Pot episode. So one that I thought was kind of, if I had to buy one for kind of regular drinking, I think this would be the one of the 6 that I would go for, just because I think it strikes the exact balance of things that personally I look for. The Smokeshou and the Camphire, while they are good and interesting teas, they don't, it's like if I want something to have as like my normal ripe, I want something that tastes a little bit more like a ripe. And so for me, that is something like Ageless Phase as opposed to those other 2. Not saying that's bad, and in fact, perfectly reasonable people can make different decisions. So I'm not saying that this is the one correct decision, just that this, for my preferences, would be the one that I go for. Now onto one that didn't quite fit my preferences at all, Phase 5. So when I served this in the morning, my wife immediately described it as foul and undrinkable. And while I found it to be a little bit more drinkable, it would not be my favorite. So this is one that he's trying to kind of imitate coffee. And unfortunately, in my opinion, it just is not really pleasing at all. You could sort of have it with food, I guess, but in my opinion, there are better teas to be had. Maybe some people like this tea. I would be curious certainly to hear, just because it is a very unique profile that it has. I've heard it's also somewhat similar to the Cacao 80, which I did not sample. So not a favorite, not one I would personally recommend, but I am curious to see if maybe other people have had different experiences with the Phase 5 kind of White2Tea's attempt at coffee. And I do always respect someone that is trying different things. And if you notice, a lot of these, he is trying different things. One I'm not reviewing is Big O V3, which I thought also was pretty good for what it was. Okay, so last up, I have Loon Call in the Dark. So now we're getting into a little bit higher end territory. This one's 45 cents a gram. This one is just also a very solid ripe, in my opinion. It's dark, thick, it's got a nice cocoa taste to it. It's just a little bit bitter, but in a way that I find quite nice. It's very complex. I did find this tea to be a fair bit better Gung Fu than kind of the more casual brewing that I do in the morning. So definitely one that I feel like kind of gets a little bit into more of the higher end ripe territory. Is it better than Ageless Phase? Yeah, it probably is, but I do think that Ageless Phase for me, as far as these more conventional ripes, is the one that would is the one I would be more heartily recommend, just because I find it a little more pleasing, especially considering the price point there. Okay, so that wraps up these White2Tea kind of just quick capsule reviews. Let me know how you like this format. If it's something that you did like, perhaps I will try to give it a go on something that makes sense. I mean, I do still get the itch to try new teas and whatnot. So it's a format I'm not necessarily opposed to. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I will see y'all next time. Cheers.